master and that's all that you're interested in, there were plenty of other yeshivas to go to. But if you want to become a master in serving Hashem, Tomchei Temimim was an excellent address and a place to go. Okay. Excuse me, I'm going to drink a little bit. My throat's a little dry. Okay.
It's good it's not Erev Yom Kippur, Erev Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah. That's what happens when I travel. It's I came home yesterday from overseas, and this is one of the consequences of being a frequent flyer. So, within the student body of Tomchei Temimim, it was common that certain individuals that stood out, there were two interesting categories that you fit into. Okay? What would those two categories be? So, one of the unique elements of Tomchei Temimim in the process, in order to fulfill the mission that was established by the Rebbe Rashab, was that part of the curriculum of the yeshiva, in addition to, of course, learning Gemara, Halacha, right, the standards of any yeshiva, was also a formal, integrated into the curriculum, the study of Chassidus. Not to say that in other yeshivas they didn't study Chassidus, but it was not part of the formal curriculum where there was times of the day dedicated specifically for the study of Chassidus. Okay, so that sets Tomchei Temimim apart in this mission to create Ovdei Hashem. Okay, in a very unique way that could be accomplished according to the Rabbeim through Chassidus. I say that carefully because now, knowing that this is going very public on YouTube, I don't want it to sound as if I'm saying that the only way you could be a true Ovdei Hashem is if you learn Chassidus. That's for the public. but I can say that Chassidus is absolutely 100% a very important element in helping a person become Ovdei Hashem. So what evolved in Tomchei Temimim, something that's kind of a natural thing that happens in this kind of a setting, like in the context of a group, right? That's identified as a yeshiva or whatever, right? Was that a bacher who was an accomplished bacher, Tomchei Temimim, would be known either by one of these two categories, either an oved. An oved simply means one who serves Hashem, or the other term would be a maskil. Now, a maskil is someone who has attained a very, very profound understanding of the teachings of Chassidus. Okay? That would include the teachings of Chassidus that touch upon very abstract ideas. For example, one of the main figures of Tomchei Temimim was a famous mashpia. His name was Rebbe Shmuel Geroinem. For many years, a mashpia in Tomchei Temimim in Lubavitch. Rebbe Shmuel Geroinem was known to have mastered the understandings of Chassidus. He would give over shiurim, and he would explain the deepest and the most abstract concepts that are discussed in the Chassidus of Chabad. Deep understanding into godliness, the relationship with God and the world, and how to understand, the notion of an image of God as opposed to a God that has no image, and etc., etc. Okay. Then there was a mashpia in yeshiva. He was also a mashpia, not a rosh yeshiva. So his function was to teach Chassidus, and he was a master. And those Talmidim who studied under him became, those that were shaykh, those who seemed to have a tendency towards that way of understanding things. So he developed many such talmidim. At the time, the Rebbe Rashab was the Rebbe. The Rebbe Rashab would say a maimer every Friday after Likkutei. The maimer could be maybe 2 or even 3 hours long. And the Rebbe Rashab, in his Maimarim, he touched on many very deep and difficult concepts to understand. And these Talmidim, Baruch Hashem, under the guidance of Rabbi Shmuel Geronom, they developed a mastery, so to speak, of that Chassidus. Maskil, that's the term, the maskilim, right, in the Bible. Now, maskilim also has a negative connotation because the maskilim is also the term that's used for the reformers that were also very popular at that time. The Haskalah movement, right? The modernization of Judaism and whatever. Okay, we won't get into that. But in the context of the culture of Lubavitch, a maskil was certainly not somebody like that, right? It was rather, it's the Haskalah movement was in English, it's referred to as the Enlightenment, right? The era of the Enlightenment in the 1800s, right? Which gave birth basically to the reform movement, which pretty much spelled the end of Yiddishkeit for anyone who followed that Deren. But like I said, in Lubavitch, again, this is the term that's used, a maskil. Okay. By the way, this has also somehow carried over into the culture of other yeshivas today. So I was speaking to a young fellow that went through the non-Lubavitch system, and he was speaking about a certain individual, and he was saying how that individual was a Baal Machshava. What's a Baal Machshava? I understood right away. Somebody in the yeshiva system, one of the mentors, the guides, right, who would discuss with the Bachim, probably in the context of Musar or something like that, some more deeper concepts of godliness and the world and so on and so forth, outside seemingly of the context of pure Talmudic studies. Okay? Baal Machshava. So now we have the term in the culture of yeshivas in general, but this is a term that in Lubavitch was already in existence already for a long time. The maskil. Then you have what's called the Oved. What's the Oved? The Oved is the one, and this was also something that was very much part of the culture of Tomchei Temimim, would be someone who, for example, would spend hours davening. Many hours davening. This was actually very unique in the Tomchei Temimim system. Now, it was a yeshiva, and it had a schedule, and like I mentioned, learning of Chassidus was part of that schedule. So before davening in the morning, there would be an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours of the study of Chassidus, and only afterwards there would be davening. But then the davening has a point at which you go and eat breakfast, and then you have to start your regular Seder, open up your Gemara, generally speaking, and start, and the rest of the day spend immersed in the study of the Talmud Gemara. There were those individuals, however, and they would spend literally hours in some secluded place, Parshas in davening to Hashem, trying to develop Avas Hashem, Yiras Hashem, love of Hashem, awe of Hashem, right? This was very much part of the culture in Tomchei Temimim, and they were known by a different term, the Ovdim. They were called the Ovdim. So you have the Maskilim and you have the Ovdim.
Again, I have a question, if you don't
Yes,
mind.
question.
In terms of when you reference davening, would that be a similar pattern of davening that we do, or is it in the case of these people? Is it meditation or a combination? What form again did that take?
Exactly the same davening, but we generally, and this is the way that most of the world, we daven with a minyan, right? So it's kind of like very formal, and you go through the davening, and you're really just part of like a routine. I hate to call it that, but it's somewhat of a routine. The Oivdim would step out of that routine, right? And they might be present in shul for the davening to answer the baruch or the kedusha, but they would be on a personal tract where their davening would literally, they would be doing the same davening, obviously, but with a lot more meditation, a lot more self-reflection, and it would literally take hours. Okay, so it was something that, the Oivdim had special permission to come late for the regular Seder of Yeshiva, the regular, schedule. They had special permission. Unfortunately, there could be, someone who wasn't so sincere about it, right? And the mashpiyim would have to discern whether you were sincere or not. And if you were sincere, then you would actually have special permission to spend more time in the davening, right, and come late for the regular yeshiva schedule. But the actual davening is the same davening that we have, right, from the Siddur. Does that answer the question, Moshe? Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. I
had to unmute myself. Yeah, that answers it. Thank you.
So there was another mashpia. His name was Michal Bliner, who was a very warm and an emotional person. They say that, sometimes you'd be talking to him and he would get very passionate, whatever it was, usually when it was about something that deal with one of the Talmidim in Yeshiva. And, tears would just freely flow from his eyes with this Reb Michal. I knew a chassid like that too, in Kfar Chabad, who I had the great merit of having somewhat of a relationship with. Reb Zalman Levin was his name. He was a chassid that he would sing a nigun, and there was no such thing that he would just sing a nigun. He would sing a nigun with the full hearts, and there was always tears streaming down his eyes when he would sing this thing. Okay, actually, Mendel Markel knows this chassid, and he's actually really good at imitating how this Reb Zalman Levin would sing a nigun. And I always tell Mendel, I want to hear a nigun, but from Zalman Levin's Nigunim, and he would sing it and he would imitate him. He does a pretty good job at imitating him. I don't know about the tears, but every time he would sing this nigun, I would envision myself sitting at his Shabbos table, which I was occasionally at in Kfar Chabad, and that's what would happen. He would sing a nigun, and Mendel Markel has a knack of literally putting me in that place, because he imitates him very well. And this is a person who, if you had a question in Tanya or in a minor of the Alter Rebbe, I'm not so sure that he would be the person that you would go to ask, right? I'm sure he learned the Likkutei Torah, but I don't know that that's what he was known for, being able to explain, some difficult topic in the minor of Chassidus. But he was definitely somebody that you could look up to and say, wow, there's something unique about this person, right? Something that's like, I don't know how common it is in other places, but in Lubavitch, someone who was trained and brought up in the Terchet Mimim, there were those individuals that literally, that was the image that they portrayed. And their davening would be like, it's amazing. Just to watch them daven would be an inspiration. I have an uncle, Rabbi Gorelik, Olav Shalom, from Milan, shliach, the Rebbe shliach in Milan. And it was at a bar mitzvah of a nephew of mine, and he was there. And there was a farbrengen that followed. Farbrengen that went into the wee hours of the morning, I should say. And I remember my uncle describing when he was a boy of maybe 11 years old, 11, 12. This was it was during World War II, and many Lubavitcher Hasidim, many families found refuge in the southern part of Russia, in a city called, there's a book that just, oh my gosh, it just flew out of my head. but in Russia,
Samarkand?
in Samarkand, right? Samarkand. So he was a young boy in Samarkand. His family, somehow they found, their way to Samarkand together with hundreds of other Lubavitch families. And that's how they basically survived. The Nazis never reached to the area of Samarkand. And in addition to that, because the Soviet government was so busy fighting the war, they were a little bit more lax with the, with the things that they were well known for, the oppression of Yiddishkeit, yeshivas, and so on. So it was like interesting. Ironically, it was kind of like a little golden era in Chabad history. Those 4 or 5 years during World War II, we had a big congregation of many Chabad families in the city Samarkand in Georgia, or whatever it's called. Okay. So he was saying that when they were kids, there was a chassid, his name was Yisrael Noach Blazinski. And Yisrael Noach Blazinski was known as an oived, like I'm describing, an oived that would daven for hours and hours. So Shabbos, he said, we would be playing outside the shul after everybody had long finished davening, and they already had their Shabbos, they made Kiddush, and they had their Shabbos meal. And the kids, when they were playing outside, they would run over to the window to hear, where is Yisrael Noach holding a davening, right? So again, it's just interesting to hear, a chassid reminiscing his youth, right? There was the chassid Yisrael Noach. He was a great oived, and he would daven for many, many hours on Shabbos afternoon, and the kids all knew, and it was the whole thing, while they're playing, to run over to the window, and Yisrael Noach is holding by Yishtabach. Yisrael Noach is holding wherever he was that he was holding. There's actually there's a tape of his davening on a regular weekday that somebody once sent me years and years ago. You could actually, this was later after the war, when he was living in Paris, the Yisrael Noach, one of his grandchildren recorded him davening in the middle of the weekday, right? And it's a pleasure, just a pleasure to listen to. You hear a davening that's like so, full of heart, and it's just something very beautiful to listen. Okay. That was an oived. Then I began with by describing a maskil, right? The truth is that, so first let me just preface by saying that there are many sichas from the Friedrich Rebbe in which the Friedrich Rebbe speaks somewhat in harsh terms about these maskilim. What the Friedrich Rebbe's issue is that the purpose of Hasidus is not to become a deep thinker in abstract issues that have to do with Hashem and creation and his interaction with the creation. These are all part of Hasidus. They're all important. But there can be, says the Friedrich Rebbe, a tendency to be so totally immersed in that element of Hasidus and to forget that ultimately it's all about developing a relationship with Hashem. And more specifically, an emotional relationship with Hashem. That which I described when I mentioned the Oivdim. So Haskalah, without Avodah, there are some really, really harsh words from the Friedrich Rebbe about that unfortunate thing. On the other hand, Oived, right, and not necessarily someone who had mastered the deeper understanding of Hasidus, probably can get a pass. Okay, if you're Oived and not a maskil, okay, you still have to try. It's part of the system. Learning Hasidus and understanding Hashem based on the pasuk from Navi, Das Hashem Lekecha. You must know Hashem, right? And this is what Chabad is known for, not just this simple blind faith, but rather a very articulated and a very sophisticated understanding of Hashem, all put forth in the Maimorim of Chassidus. Yes, but not everyone can master it. So if one is an Oived and he hasn't mastered the Haskalah, so to speak, I would say he gets a pass. But someone who's a maskil, right? but it does not transfer into actual avodah, becoming a better davener. That the Rebbe Rebbe did not have much tolerance for. Okay, so that's important to mention. I know people like that, and they get a hard time at a chiddush farbrengen. You know, another chassid will give him a hard time. He says, "Oh, askola, right?" I had a friend in Kfar Chabad who was in yeshiva in Kfar Chabad. At the time, the mashpia was Mendel Futterfass. Now, Mendel Futterfass is a famous chassid, especially for his Mesiras Nefesh that he had in Russia. He spent many years in the Russian Gulag. He was separated from his family because they actually managed to get out of Russia after World War II, and he ended up being stuck in Russia without his family. Very long story. Very fascinating story. The Mendel did finally come, and the Rebbe himself appointed him to be. He joined his family that they were living in London, but then the Rebbe told him that he should take his family, move to Kfar Chabad, and become the mashpia in yeshiva. So there was a famous mashpia there for many years of Shlomo Chaim Kesselman. Shlomo Chaim Kesselman was there pretty much from the beginning, the establishment of Kfar Chabad, until like 1970 when he passed away, Toshanamid, I believe. And it was shortly after that, Mendel Futterfass, who just a couple of years before that had come out of Russia, the Rebbe asked Mendel to become the mashpia in yeshiva in Kfar Chabad. Now, Mendel was certainly known more as the Ovid type of a chassid, okay? And he was someone that when he would farbrengen, that's what would come. It would come across.
Your uncle Zalman of blessed,
yes,
your uncle Zalman of blessed memory used to mention Futterfass quite frequently.
You would mention this Mendel Futterfass?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Uncle Zalman, he was known to be more of a maskil than an Ovid, by the way.
I was just thinking that.
He was also, he you know, my grandmother once, when I was a kid, well, an early young teenager, so a cousin of mine, also a Posner, so a cousin of mine, his older sister became a Kala. And I didn't even remember where this was, but we were in the car, myself and my cousin, whose sister had become a Kala to a Bacher. They were the Shimon Zonnefeld, lives in Eretz Yisrael. And my cousin and I were arguing whether the Chassan was a maskil or a Ovid. Okay? My grandmother happened to be in the car. And she turns around and she says, if he's truly a good Bacher and a Chassidish Bacher, then he's both a maskil and a Ovid. That's what Mrs. Posner commented when she interjected into this argument. Okay. Oh, wow. This is going to be a little Zalman Levin singing. Is that what we're getting, Chaim? Yes, this is Zalman. This is the Chassid Zalman Levin. We're going to hear him sing? Are we going to see the tears in his eyes?
Yeah, we could do it at the end of the shiur also. If you want to do
okay.
it.
Okay, if you're having trouble, yeah.
It works. It works just fine, but we could do it now also. Up to you.
Okay, let's hear 2 minutes. 2 minutes of the Ovid.
Zalman Levin.
Oh, this is when he was young. Yes, I'm not hearing. Okay, in any case, yeah, I'm not hearing. Are you here? This was he was performing. So. Okay. Yeah, it's not coming across very clear.
What?
It's not coming across very clear, so.
Okay, I'll have to play with settings one day, figure it out. Okay.
Okay. In any case, so Yeah, so, so there you have it. Mrs. Posner that taught us that what a true chassid is. You can even Mrs. Posner knew that a chassid has to be both a oived and a maskil. You can't be one or the you just one or the other. So she settled the argument between the two of us, my cousin and I, right? And if he's a good bacher, then he has to be both. Okay. So one time, Ramendel Futterfass, he was famous for his farbrengens, and Thursday night in Yeshiva in Kfar Chabad, he was farbrengen. I had a friend, and him and another friend felt that they weren't getting enough haskola shiurim in Kfar Chabad. Whatever, they felt that they weren't feeling satisfied with the classes that were being given. There was a chassid who lived in Tel Aviv. His name was Moshe Gerari. Moshe Gerari, he was a maskil. He wrote deep articles about Chassidus. He even gave a shir on the radio. Or actually, that was Rebbe Noch. No, not Moshe Gerari. Moshe Gerari was also a big maskil. This was a different chassid, I'm sorry. It was Rebbe Nochem Goldschmidt. Rebbe Nochem Goldschmidt. Our Goldschmidt here is in that Goldschmidt family. It's not his grandfather, it's his great uncle or something, I'm not sure. But in any case, Rebbe Nochem Goldschmidt, he used to give shiurim on the radio in Israel, and he was known to be a master of explaining deep thought, deep ideas in Chassidus. So they went to his house Thursday night. Right? They got out of Kfar Chabad somehow. They probably hitchhiked their way to Tel Aviv, and they had a special shir Thursday night with Rebbe Nochem Goldschmidt in order to fulfill their need for some more haskola of Chassidus. Okay. They come back to yeshiva. It's late at night, Thursday night, and Mendel is still farbrenging. They walk into the farbrengen, and the Mendel sees them come in. Wo bist du gewesen? Where were you? So they told the Mendel, we went to hear to Reb Nochem Goldschmidt to hear Ashir Chassidus. So the Mendel, it rings in my ear. My friend was telling me, ooh, Hashkole, we get lernen Hashkole. You're going for Hashkole, right? So here you have an example, just from one little expression of Mendel Futterfass, this kind of cultural, dissonance, I guess you could call it, going on in Timchitamimim between the maskil and the oived. They were looking for Askola. They came in back the middle of the Fabregen, and Mendel Futterfass, with just one expression, pretty much told them everything that he wanted to tell them. It's a Goldschmidt. Deren Hashkole. Right? This is how Mendel reacted to what took place, which made a deep impression on my friend. And apparently it's even making an impression on me, because I just repeated the story because it means a lot. It tells a lot. Okay. So now you got a little bit of a picture into this little cultural thing going on in the Chabad system between those who are known to be the maskilim and those who are known to be the oivdim. Okay, and ultimately, if you really want to have the proper image, you want to be both. You don't want to be one or the other. Okay, but if you have to choose, and you could only be one, choose the oived rather than the mask. So that's my own personal advice. Okay. Why do I mention all this? Because we just started learning Shar HaYichud V'Ho Emunah in Tanya. What does the Alter Rebbe discuss? The Alter Rebbe discusses the Echad. We say every day, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. It's a mitzvah d'oraisa to read that portion of the Torah twice a day, in the morning and in the night. And basically, it starts with a declaration of the oneness of Hashem. In Shar HaYichud Ve'Amunah, the Alter Rebbe goes into a very deep and abstract discussion of what that means. Included in that abstract discussion is to understand somewhat better what The Zohar means when it speaks about the higher Yehuda and the lower Yehuda. Yehuda Elah, Yehuda Tata. This is in contrast with the first book of Tanya, because it can be said that the first book of Tanya focuses more on Avodah, developing a relationship with Hashem, and primarily not so much of an intellectual connection, but rather an emotional connection. What are the topics that come up in the first book of Tanya? Is the Beinoni. It's all about the Beinoni. What is the Beinoni struggling with? He's struggling with a Nefesh Habahamis. The Nefesh Habahamis is primarily an emotional animal, okay? Yes, he has elements of intellect, but he is primarily an emotional being, okay? And the whole first book of Tanya is how to master the emotions of the Nefesh Habahamis, right? And to develop a more pure and holy emotional state, right? Where you're connected emotionally to Hashem, rather than just your natural impulses. That's the first book of Tanya, and I think it would be fair to say that it's a book that probably fits more into the category of Avodah, serving Hashem. Who serving Hashem? Not tzaddikim, Beinonim. What do Beinonim struggle with? A Nefesh Habahamis. What are their biggest struggles? Not some intellectual queries into the deeper understandings of God. No, it's plain and simple. My Nefesh Habahamis. You want to know what a Nefesh Habahamis is? It's all about passions and so on and so forth that are part of the chagas. They're part of our emotional system rather than our intellectual system. There's that element too, of course, but usually it's the intellect that's actually being driven by the passions, as the Alter Rebbe explains in Perik Bov of Tanya. Okay, but then Shar Yichud Emunah, I don't think Avas Hashem is even mentioned in Shar Yichud Emunah. It's mentioned in the Hakadama, in the preface, okay. But in the 13 chapters of Shar Yichud Emunah, I don't think that Avas Hashem Yosef Hashem is even mentioned. Okay, what does it speak? It speaks about existence. It's a deep kind of. It could also be referred to in English as some deep philosophy, an existential philosophy of what is the nature of existence. Okay, these are of course more abstract principles. This is what's dealt with in Shar Yichud Emunah, the Haskalah of Chassidus. Now, it is true that the Alter Rebbe wrote this first, but Al Pi Hashgacha Pratis, when Tanya was published, it was put as the second book of Tanya. I think the message perhaps is that if you are a newcomer to Chassidus, right, you have to first understand that Chassidus is develop the Avodah, how to serve Hashem. How to serve Hashem, not just with your brain, but how to serve Hashem with your complete being, with everything, with your convictions, with your emotions, and so on and so forth. So, therefore, I think the first book of Tanya comes first. But then we have to understand that in order for a person, and this is what's in the Hakdama, the preface to the second book, is that all of this pursuit of understanding the deeper existential issues, right, of the very existence of reality, ultimately is a foundation for our emunah, for our belief, and it has to develop into an emotional attachment. Interestingly, there's not much dedicated to that in the actual chapters of Shar Yichud Ve'emunah, but it's there in the Hakdam and the preface to Shar Yichud Ve'emunah. It ends by saying that in order for one to develop a true and a deeper emunah in Hashem, you have to understand these existential issues. The more you understand them, the better you are prepared to then move on and to become a complete servant of Hashem with all of your capacities, your emotional as well. Okay? So, Moshe, I didn't get to your original question, but I think I'm going to leave it for an upcoming shiur, okay? Where we'll actually kind of delve into what does the Alter Rebbe tell us that gives us an understanding in this idea. This again, it's a philosophical existential concept of that there is a unifying element to all that exists. And of course, that unifying element is Hashem. And that's what we mean when we say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. There's an ultimate unifying core to all that exists. And then to understand that it exists intellectually on two levels. Why do we need two levels? That is part of the discussion. Why do we even have to discuss that it exists on two levels? Why can't we, I mean, once we get into a little bit of understanding the higher level, so then why is there even a lower level? And that is something that in Mitzvah Hashem, I cannot do justice in the few minutes that are remaining. And in Mitzvah Hashem, next week, we will continue on this topic. We will still be in Chitas in the second book of Tanya, so it would be appropriate. I actually decided to broach this subject because when I was preparing the Likkutei Torah this morning of Parshas Behhaloscha, it absolutely comes up. The idea of what do we contemplate? What is the meditation when we recite that pasuk Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, the most fundamental of Jewish expressions? I think that when they were moving in on to save the survivors of the massacre in Eretz Yisrael, right? So there was a lot of confusion. So you go into a house, you don't know if there's a terrorist in the house or there's a family of hostages in the house, or people the survivors in the house. So the soldiers, who themselves were probably not necessarily, they may have been, more secular, but they would scream, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, right? And waiting to hear a response from, again, the victims who are also, not necessarily those who practiced saying it twice a day, as the Shulchan Aruch instructs us. But Ayid, you know what I mean? Ayid is Ayid. And there's hardly, unfortunately, it does exist, but there's hardly a Yid that doesn't know that pasuk, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Okay? So Mitzvah Hashem, next year, we'll delve into some of the actual ideas that the Alter Rebbe discusses. And even more importantly, why is it even important for us to delve into this, these ideas, and what does it contribute to our being a better oved, a better servant of Hashem? Okay, so Chaim, so I'm going to leave it there. So Moshe, I guess I promised that we'll get to it. We will, Mitzvah Hashem.
I'll look forward to that. I'm going back to your brief discussion about Samarkand. I'm looking at a book that we have. It's by Rabbi Hillel Zaltzman.
Right, Samarkand. That is the Samarkand. Yes.
That's it. Yeah, I'm looking right at this book.
That is the Samarkand. So like I say, my uncle at the time, he became bar mitzvah when in Samarkand during those years. Like I said, it was like what was ironic is that this was like in the history, this was probably the most devastating period in Jewish history. But for that small, group of Chabad Hasidim, it was actually kind of like a golden era, so to speak, because they came together. And they were together with great mashpiyim, Rabbi Nemelech was there, and they actually established, it was an underground yeshiva, but they were pretty much free to function, without any interruption from the Soviet authorities. And when you talk to the people who grew up in that era, during that time, they have such fond memories of it. Like I say, this was at Fabrengen with my uncle, Rabbi Garelic, and he spoke about how Yisrael Noach, the famous chassid Rabbi Yisrael Noach, right, who used to daven, with great fervor and passion, known as one of the exemplary oivdim, an oivd in Lubavitch. So I think Rabbi Yitkin, I think this would be your aunt, I think, or maybe two of your aunts were actually born there, right? Your father, Olav Shalom, is two of his older sisters, I think, were born in Samarkand.
One passed away there.
One of them for sure. Maybe the other one was in Poking, maybe when they actually made it out of Russia.
Lived in Austria, DP camp. But two children in Samarkand, but because of the war, one of them passed away.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at a photograph in this book. It's a photograph of our Rebbe, the Rebbe of our time, who arrived in Samarkand in the 1950s.
No, the Rebbe was not in Samarkand. No.
Then the caption of this picture is incorrect then.
Read that caption. What does it say?
It says the first picture of the Rebbe to arrive in Samarkand in the 1950s. I'll take a picture of it.
It could be the Rebbe met those families in Paris in 1947. In 1947, many of these families managed to escape from Russia, which is a whole story in itself. And the Rebbe, and amongst them was the Rebbe's mother, Rebbe Tzimchana, and the Rebbe traveled. He was already living in the United States from 1941. The Rebbe traveled to Paris, where many of them had settled, including his mother. And the basic, the reason the Rebbe went was to arrange to bring his mother to America. But at the time, Rebbe spent a few months there, and he met with many of these families that were previously together in Samarkand. But I'm not sure what that caption is. Something doesn't.
We actually learned about it this past week. In the Gemara, we're learning about Sir Pnei Rav, the importance of looking at the image of the picture of a tzaddik, and not to look at a Russia. Someone lived long because they didn't look at a Russia. So we spoke about Rabbi Simcha Gorodetsky was in Samarkand, and he was arrested with 10 other of his chassidim and people who he taught became chassidim through him, and he was sentenced to death. And the prosecution said that in all of their houses we found these weapons, a picture of the Rebbe and a Tanya. So I think it's talking. It was very dangerous to have a picture of the Rebbe then in your house.
Uh-huh. So I'm not sure, Moshe.
The Rebbe, which came to Samarkand in the 1950s.
There probably is one in Shul. There's one. Yeah. So we clarify what that is exactly. Okay, so good job, everybody.
I just sent you a text with a picture of. I took a picture of that photograph in the book and the cover of the book.
WhatsApp? Is it a WhatsApp?
No, it's a regular text.
Regular text. Okay, hold on. Let me check my phone.
I think it might have just been sent just now. I just heard them.
Okay, so this is the book. The first picture of the Rebbe the picture arrived in Samarkand. That's what it is. It was a picture of the Rebbe. This is a picture actually taken by Trainer Studios, who I actually know. I know who that is. He was the photographer at my aunt's wedding in 1962. So this is a picture of the Rebbe standing, I think, at the door of 770, if I'm not mistaken. And it was a picture that made it to Samarkand in the 1950s. That would be
got it.
Right.
Yeah, I know. You read it much more closely than I did.
That's what it was. That's what it was. Yeah, it is a little misleading. Yeah, it's the story is about the picture, not about the Rebbe. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yes, that is it. Okay, so good Shabbos, and you're on a cliffhanger. Mirz Hashem, next Friday we will talk about. Wait, let me just see where I'm going to be next Friday. Am I even going to be around? Uh-oh. Yeah, okay. I'm going to be somewhere early, but the Mirz Hashem, we should be able to have the shit. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk about the higher unity and the lower unity And why is there even a discussion? If unity is unity, why should there be a higher and a lower one, right? I would think that if one of them is designated to be the lower one, then it's not the absolute unity. So why are we even bothering delving into the idea of a unity that doesn't seem to be the perfect unity, because there's a higher unity that's higher than it. So
that elicits the question.
Yeah. Okay. So Mitzvah. By the way, part of one of the shiurim that I heard from another great maskil in Lubavitch was Abiel Khan. He discussed why chapter 3 ends with a question, and we will get to that as well. But the lesson is that there are some questions that are best left as a question, where the question is better even than the answer. But we'll attempt. We'll leave you with the question for the week, and the Mitzvah Shem next week we will attempt to at least maybe not totally answer, but introduce some clarification. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and good shot.